Hello, Bible readers. It is Friday, December 11th. We're reading from 2 Samuel chapter 5 and 6 and Acts chapter 20, verses 1 through 38. In 2 Samuel, we've got a new king, right? And a new king either sinks or swims right away, typically. David, right away, does something that Saul could not do, and that was to end the Philistine threat. Israel has security now, and maybe that's the first and foremost thing expected from or looked for from a king. Also, he builds a palace with cedar from Tyre. This may seem like a throwaway piece of information, like, so what? But this is establishing a different trading pattern than than Israel has had before. And this trade is happening between Tyre and Jerusalem. Jerusalem is going to be at the center of trade and life in Israel. And so that's established further here. David is going to bring economic, military, and religious strength and stability throughout his reign. That's what makes it that's what makes Israel so prosperous, is that there is so much stability. This is the beginning of that strength and stability, is as we see trade starting to happen, the Philistines are put away, so now Israel can focus on greater things. The ark is the other part of the first half of our readings from 2 Samuel. In 1 Samuel, chapters 5 and 6, you might remember there were a couple chapters there about the ark. The ark there was almost like a character unto itself with its own powers. It was almost like it was personified in many ways. Here in 2 Samuel 6, the ark is far more dependent on David. It doesn't have its own agency quite like it does in 1 Samuel. David brings it to Jerusalem. Well, that's where it belongs in his mind, but it also solidifies his credibility, another sign of strength and connectedness to God. One other thing about our reading from the Old Testament today, this Uzzah, U-Z-Z-A-H, that he is just struck dead after, doing something fairly helpful. There's really no explanation that's going to make us feel great about what happened or why it would happen. Commentaries that I've read, they think, and this is as good as I can do, they think it's meant to be a reminder that encountering God is a risky business. It is meant to be done with care, that this God is still not only to be loved, but also feared. Not exactly where a lot of our spirituality is, but that's where 2 Samuel is at this point. Okay, Acts. Luke structures Paul's voyage to mirror Jesus's journey to death and triumph in Jerusalem. We see the exact same pieces fall into place as Luke tells about Paul. Paul announces his intent. Here's where I'm going. He sends out delegates ahead of him, and then he goes himself. Then we have this resurrection-like thing that happens between Paul and this other person on the way. Luke wants us to understand that the power of the risen Jesus is at work in the Apostle Paul precisely at the moment that he's making his way to the chains and afflictions of Jerusalem, as Paul says in his discourse. So that's the point that Luke is trying to make. And then after we have this explanation of the journey that is to come, we get Paul's farewell discourse, much like Jesus offers a farewell discourse. The point of this discourse, and really whether it's Peter or Stephen or Jesus or Paul doing one of these farewell discourses, the point is to instruct the listener, or the reader in our case, to instruct us in certain moral values. The main thing here is remember the words of the Lord Jesus. That's what Paul wants to convey through this farewell discourse. Last thing, Luke does an incredible job capturing Paul's themes in Paul's own language choices. Scholars have looked at, the way Paul speaks in this speech. Luke is obviously drawing on something that actually happened here, because it's not quite the way Luke would write it himself. I am one with my God. My God is with us, all of us, at all times and in all places.